Hello, Mr. Ambassador.
Hello.
Let's talk about the protests here in Canada. Ostensibly, these began as anti-war protests, ceasefire protests, peace protests. What we hear now at just about every demonstration or march are calls for Palestine to be Arab from water to water, or calls for Jews to go back to Europe, or chants that Israel will soon be gone. So this has become, to a wide degree, an eliminationist movement. I can't think of anything else like it. We have protests in Canada against Russia. People angrily protest China. They protest Iran. But I don't hear chants at those protests for those countries to be wiped off the map. My question for you is, it is a part of your job here to tell people Israel's side of the story. It's not going very well, is it?
What we are seeing here right now is a sort of a reaction to a campaign of misinformation and disinformation, of Israel being called racist and supremacist and all these, and colonialist, which is of course abhorrent, it's ridiculous. But the fact that people are walking the streets, some of them are Canadians who grew up here, who are tolerant, who are respectful of the law and all of that, and find it easy to say from the river to the sea without understanding what it really means. That's the issue that boggles my mind, because I'm asking myself, how can you chant things in the street when you have no idea what you're talking about? If you ask them what river and what sea, or what does liberation mean, or how can you reconcile rape with revolution, and they'll be perplexed. But that question is not often asked. So I'm asking myself, this big silent majority of Canadians who are out there, they go about their own lives, and they don't really bother themselves too much with what's going on. And they see the numbers of people being killed in Gaza, and they see the images that are presented to them by the media. I see those people saying, well, this has to stop. And I understand that. Of course, we would like it to stop as well. No more killings, no more destruction. But the point is that we can't really stop unless we get our hostages back and Hamas is no longer a threat to us, or Hezbollah, or Iran. It's as if Israel started October 7th war, as if Israel decided to go into Gaza and to do whatever it does. And this is lopsided, and much of that has become very, very popular among many people. My dilemma is, or my challenge is actually, is to bring people to understand that we have to fight. There is no other way.
I don't know that this argument is getting across to Canadians. There is polling to indicate that 45% of Canadians agree with the notion that Israel is committing genocide. And that's up from 43% just a couple months before that. The longer this goes on, it does seem that Canadians are turning in large numbers against Israel. And this is the public relations effort that your office is involved in. So I say again, it does not seem to be going very well.
So I would again disagree on that, because I think that when people ask questions, there are specific questions in a specific context. That can be genocide. We've heard it before. These are claims that are based on information and disinformation that's been spread out by Hamas itself. The Ministry of Health, so-called, is a Hamas organization. So when they give out numbers, you never know how much of them are terrorists. We'll not deny that civilians are dying. Families are dying. Babies are dying. Livelihoods are being destroyed. We know that. We know that. We know that also at the same time, those same people will live side by side with us forever because they are our neighbors. It is hard for the broader public to make a distinction between who is a terrorist, who is a civilian, and how successful Israel's operation is. But we have to fight because Hamas doesn't leave us any choice.
You know that anti-Semitism in Canada has surged to historic highs since October 7th. Things that I never thought I would see. Gunshots at synagogues, Molotov cocktails, bomb threats, bomb plots. The violence is not always symbolic. Here in Ottawa, there was a terrorist plot against the Jews of Ottawa, a bomb plot. There are lines that are being crossed, angry people chanting outside of the holiest places, the most private places. When you bring this up, when you push back against this, these obvious acts of anti-Semitism, what you are invariably told is, this isn't about Jews. Our target is not Jews. Don't try to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism. Do not use a charge of racism as a shield. This isn't about you, is what the Jews of Canada are told. This is about Israel. Mr. Ambassador, it might not be fair that Jews in Canada and in the United States and all around the world, it might not be fair that Jews outside of Israel are blamed for what Israel does. But it is true that Jews are blamed for what Israel does. Does Israel take any responsibility for that?
What I'm hearing very often, by the way, is not what you just said. This is not about you, it's about Israel. I'm hearing more often than not, this is not Canada. So when "O Canada" is being played at the flag-raising ceremony and people are singing, those anti-Israel protesters continue to wave their flags and chant "From the river to the sea," I see that this is exactly what I'm told. This is not Canada. They are not Canadians. So there is a very clear distinction that needs to be made between those groups who hide themselves behind masks and go to the JCC old age home here in Ottawa and shout at those people, "Go back to your homes," Holocaust survivors and whoever else is there, have nothing to do with Israel. We have to understand who these people are. Where do they come from? Why are they there? What is their motivation? This is not pro-Palestinian, the fact that they're carrying the flags. They're actually out there to change something very fundamental and significant in Canada and in Western society. And this is the point. When it comes to attacking Jewish businesses, when it comes to encampments in universities, and it's about disallowing Jewish students from entering campuses, this is about actually changing civilization. Universities have a critical role in developing our knowledge base, our curiosity, our science and technology, our prosperity. And when they attack it and they want to instill their agenda on the university, to force themselves on the university, they call it divestment. So there is something very fundamental that
I'm
is
sorry to
changing
interrupt.
here.
I don't mean to be rude. I'm not sure you're answering the question. It is a fact that this is harming Jews in Canada. Does Israel take responsibility for that? To any degree? Are you here merely to represent Israel, or is anti-Semitism in Canada a priority or something you're involved
It's a very high priority, and it's on top of my discussions with any official here in Canada. And it's not an issue for me to take responsibility for a phenomenon that's inflicted by somebody else, but I do stand up and say to all Jews and non-Jews, stand up, speak up, fight against this, because this is indeed something that does not belong here. This is something that hurts our society. It also hurts our relations.
There are things that happen in Israel that Israel is responsible for that affect this. This is a bit of a complicated question, but I want to ask you about a letter that was sent by the head of the Shin Bet, Israel's security agency, Ronen Bar. It's a letter sent to Prime Minister Netanyahu and members of the cabinet. And it was a letter about Jewish terrorism. Those are his words. He called it Jewish terrorism in the West Bank. And what he said was that nothing is being done to stop this. Nothing is being done to stop the settler violence in the West Bank. And he wrote to the Prime Minister that if no action is taken, this violence will lead to global delegitimization and much bloodshed, and will be a great stain on Judaism and on all of us. He did not say this would be a great stain on the Israeli military or the Israeli government or Israelis. He said that if we don't do something to stop Jewish terrorism, this will be a stain on Jews around the world. As far as I can tell, the Prime Minister did not heed this warning, and nothing has been done to stop the violence, as far as I can tell, which the Israeli military itself, one act of violence in the West Bank, the Israeli military itself called it a pogrom. So according to your own head of security, the head of the Shin Bet, Israel is delegitimizing Jews around the world and staining the reputation of Jews. And yet, here you are telling me that anti-Semitism in Canada is something that you stand against and are doing everything you can to stop. Is that not a contradiction?
I fail to see a contradiction here. I fail to see the relationship between those two. But let's talk about what's going on in Israel and the West Bank. And the letter by Ronen Bar. Ronen Bar didn't write it on a personal note. He wrote it professionally, because that Israel Security Organization has been following what's going on the West Bank from the Jewish side, because it's a source of threat. So you're not aware, but I can provide you information about what actions, legal actions were taken against all these extremists and suspected terrorists whether it's administrative detention and the other steps that they've been taking against them to make sure that they will not be able to pursue any plans that they may have. And let's just be clear about one thing.
You're saying that there is a police response to the Jewish terrorists?
Yes, of course.
To the hilltop?
Police, military, security agencies.
Because it's recently been reported that you can't even make a 911 call in the West Bank right now, that no one will respond.
The Israeli security forces, whether it's the military, the police, or the intelligence organizations, are on top of that all the time. Whether sufficient action has been taken, that's something that you have to see a case by case. But let's be very clear here.
I mean, it wasn't looked at case by case. It was looked at historically by a journalist who said that there is a system within Israel to ignore these things.
Israel is a democracy, a very strong and solid democracy. And from the president to the prime minister to the government, everybody have condemned this very clearly. Any kind of action, any violent action, not just terrorism, which is the worst part, but any kind of action that was taken by those extremists was condemned, and police is acting on it. You can say it's not enough. You can say that there are some opinions that dissent from it, and publishing a letter, that's one of the ways to publish a
letter from the Shin Bet.
Okay, that's fine.
It's not the only one. I'll give you another example here, if that one didn't make the point.
No, it made I want you to listen to my point.
Okay.
And my point being that Israel is a democracy, and Israel has all the tools to handle these issues and these cases. And when there is criticism about Israel on that, it's fair, it's fine, I can provide you with the information to contradict that, and you may still hold your opinion, and that is fine. But
I'm not presenting you my opinion. I'm presenting you the opinion of the head of the Shin Bet.
We have to remember one thing, that in this open society that Israel is, we have some opinions, we have some people who cross the line, who are criminals, who are terrorists, and do things that they shouldn't be doing. But we are aware, and we have the legislation, and we have the tools to combat that and to make sure that those people are not able to execute their plans.
I'm sorry, I have to challenge the notion that this is just a criminal element. It's not just the Shin Bet. The Israeli military has warned the Israeli government that policy in the West Bank is driving Palestinians towards a third intifada. This was the military itself saying, if we keep the economic sanctions up, if we do not let them come work, if there are raids every night, if there are pogroms, please let me finish.
I'll tell you.
This is the military warning your government.
I hear you.
But this is,
But when you
I want to tell you why this relates to me and why this relates to Canada.
Go ahead.
It's the broader point that I want to ask you about, because this is a warning from the military that Palestinians are being driven towards intifada. What does the Israeli government do amid that warning? Minister Ben-Gvir visits one of the holiest sites in Islam, the Temple Mount, and leads Jewish prayers. This is not subtle. This is a provocation. This is daring Palestinians towards intifada. I walk down the street and I hear protesters in Toronto saying, globalize the intifada, globalize the intifada. Mr. Ambassador, there's every reason to believe that if Israel does push the Palestinians towards a third intifada, it will not just be Israelis who are targeted. It will be Canadians as well. Jews around the world, non-Jews around the world will die if this intifada is declared. Why is the Israeli government ignoring warnings from its own military? It does seem as if the government is pedal to the metal, pushing towards conflict in the West Bank, pushing towards intifada. Why would we support that?
You have to understand one thing. Israel is fighting a war right now. The people on the West Bank, 60 to 70% of them support Hamas. I don't think that you'll mention that. I don't think that you'll mention that the Palestinian Authority, which was through agreement between Israel and them, were responsible for security, are able to mitigate the flow of arms and bombs coming in from Iran into the West Bank. They are not acting on it. We know that the city of Tulkarem, of Jenin, of Nablus are centers for terrorist organizations that have been shooting mortars into Israel. I don't think that anybody reports that, anybody knows about that. Nobody thinks about them shooting directly into Israeli villages. Nobody would know about that, shooting into a girl's sleeping room. So my point being is that we are fighting an existential war right now. We are at war with terrorists on the West Bank that are waiting and are actually preparing to explode car bombs inside Israel. And we've been able to stop that on several cases, several occasions. So sometimes, there is this Israeli satiric, Ephraim Kishon, who said at some point, we'll only have the sympathy of the world once they throw us into the sea. Then we'll have the sympathy. Listen, guys, I have to tell you something. You have to remember that on the West Bank, there is no real authority. There is no government. There is no real policing. There is no real serious security enforcement agency that does anything, and so we have to do it. We would have loved the Palestinians to do that. You know that Palestinians and Israel used to do together security patrols until Palestinians started shooting their Israeli counterparts. Then it stopped. So when you have to, if you have this kind of an idea that, it's just because Israeli government's policy that Palestinians turn against Israel, you have to think twice. When you look at the school books, somebody your age, okay, when he went to kindergarten, what he did was walk over an Israeli flag. And on his whatever holiday that he had a costume, he would take a rifle and say, I'm going to be a shaheed. And every mother would tell him, I wish you were a shaheed, and I will sacrifice you. And this is the environment where they grow in. So you cannot be surprised that nowadays, on the Palestinian side, there are no people, no real leaders who will say, we want to live in peace with Israel. And you will say, yes, but it's because Israel's policy. Well, we've been at a different place. We left those
don't
places.
assume you know what I'll say.
No, but the public. And so the issue that we are looking at is something very, very significant. Blaming the Israeli government for the Palestinians' attack against Israel is a little bit far-fetched when you understand that where they come from is, and you look at the concentration of terrorism cells, and you see the motivation, and you see the preachers, and you see what's happening on universities on the West Bank, you understand that the motivation of a very big group of the population is not to allow Israel to exist.
I don't think that my questions blamed Israel for that at all. I think my questions were, why is Israel escalating in an area where it has been warned that it will be degrading and staining the reputation of Jews around the world, and it will be prompting a third intifada if it continues, an intifada that will affect people around the world. And this takes me to, you say that Israel relies on the support of Canadians and Canadian Jews specifically. Is that support a blank check?
Never a blank check. There is no blank check here. There is an agreement between Israel and diaspora. That agreement says Israel is the safe home of the Jewish people around the world. People in diaspora, you do whatever you can to support the state of Israel. You'll go and visit, you'll send your kids to study there, but if your Jewish identity is such, you see that Israel is a part of your life and part of your identity, and you find your way to connect with that country. So there is a sort of a link. We don't take anything for granted. We don't take any donation for granted. We don't take Israel for granted. We don't take our borders for granted. We don't take anything for granted. We fought for everything we had because this is our ancestral land, and this is the land that belongs to the Jewish people. So no, there is no blank check, but there is also another part of it, and that's the Jewish community also around the world would have some criticism about what's going on in Israel. And some people in Israel will say, well, if they're not living here, they don't have a right to have that criticism. This is another reason why I'm here.
Do you agree with that?
I'm here to take that criticism, to engage in that discussion, to convey to Israel, to make people understand in Israel that the Jewish community's concerns about Israel, whether it's politically, the judicial reforms, or it's security-wise because of the war, that all of that is conveyed to Israel. That's the part of the deal. So it's a two-way thing.
In Israel, it is possible for hundreds of thousands of people to take to the streets and demand an end to the war in Gaza, to demand an end to your current government. There is a difference between Israel and the Israeli government. Nobody accuses those Israelis of being anti-Zionist. They are Zionists against Netanyahu. Some of them are Zionists against the war. How long before you see a similar movement around the world? I can't imagine Jews around the world turning their backs on Israel. This is where our families live. It would be like saying that your mother shouldn't live in her home. But support for the Netanyahu government among Jews around the world and among Jews in Canada is demonstrably declining. How long before that distinction becomes an important one to people who no longer wish to bear the brunt or be blamed for what the Netanyahu government is doing.
I haven't seen any Jew, any organization, any movement that stands up now for the Jewish community saying anything about their support for the Netanyahu government. They all say just three words: Am Israel Chai. You know what that means?
It means the people.
The people of Israel live. Because they all understand that the situation that we are at right now is existential for the Jewish people. So the internal strife that exists in Israel between those who support the government and those who don't, between those who want the release of the hostages immediately now with any kind of a deal and those who say, no, let's wait, that does not resonate anywhere among the Jewish communities around the world, because for them it's different. For them, it's an existential battle that Israel is waging, and they're waging. Oh, there is a war going on here in Canada as well. For the Jewish communities, they feel that they are under war. And just last Holocaust Remembrance Day, I remember a Jewish grandmother saying her grandson wanted to go to Israel to fight. I said, no, you should stay here. You have a war to fight here. And that's anti-Semitism. So the distinction is not made here. When it comes to the Jewish people, the homeland of the Jewish people, being attacked on 7 fronts, I think that all of us want just one thing: to make sure that Am Yisrael Chai, nothing beyond that. I'm sure the time will come when people will voice their disagreement with the government and say, and some among the Jewish community will say he should go, and some will say he should stay.
You're saying this is an internal conversation for us to have in private. It's not. Our internal private conversations are being dragged out into the open. Our identities are being dragged out into the public square. I think there was a time when Jews in the diaspora did not feel entitled to be as critical about Israeli policy. But when Israeli policy is meeting us at our doorsteps, I think that there's a right to have this conversation out in the open. And I think that to demand solidarity until we get through this, well, I don't know when this ends.
I'm not demanding anything. And I invite everybody and anybody to be critical and to voice it. And I'm here, as I said, I'm open to engage in every kind of conversation. There is nothing private about it. I'm just saying that what I'm experiencing is the overriding majority of the Jewish people, communities, individuals I'm meeting only want to make one thing sure, and that is that Am Yisrael Chai, that the people of Israel live, that the state of Israel will continue to thrive. They are not in now to speak about this government or another government.
I've asked about Jewish Canadians. I want to ask about some other Canadians. There are Palestinian Canadians, and they're worried about their families. And a Canadian value, I think, that is very commonly held is that this is a safe place for people in trouble. And I think it's that principle that guided our government in declaring that they would issue 5,000 visas to Gazans to get them out of trouble, to get them out of harm's way. But in order for them to actually get those visas, they have to get entrance to Egypt for security clearance. They can't get out because Israel won't let them. COGAT, the Coordination of Government Activities in the Territories, will not allow them passage so that they could come to Canada and be reunited with their families and get away from this war. Why won't you let those Gazans go into Egypt for security clearance so that their lives could be saved?
You'll have to check your data, because with the Minister of Immigration here, they'll tell you that a few hundred already left. You'll have to mention, when you ask the question, that the Rafah crossing is being shut completely. They're not Canadians, by the way. They're Palestinians that may have direct families here. But they are not specifically targeted. There is nothing against Canada or Canadians or Palestinians in that sense. The only thing we know is that the Rafah crossing was used by Hamas to smuggle in weapons and maybe smuggle hostages or others out. So until we find a solution for this issue, how we maintain this crossing, it's closed.
Well, there are Canadians in Lebanon, tens of thousands of them. Yeah. And Melanie Joly has asked Israel for a temporary ceasefire. You've said no.
There was an overriding request from countries around the world that there should be a ceasefire. That's what she said in the United Nations. We understand that. We respect that. And our response is that we cannot cease fire while Hezbollah is continuing to fight rockets and missiles into Israel without discrimination into civilian populated areas. We have a war to fight against this organization that has been there, that has been building up for years, for tens of years, for one purpose only, to be able to deter Israel from attacking Iran. They have been shooting into Israel. They have killed 48 Israelis up until now, including 12 children playing football, soccer in Majd al-Shams. They have been destroying hundreds and hundreds of homes. They have been shooting indiscriminately into Israel, and they continue to threaten the north of Israel. So
They is Hezbollah.
Israel, yes.
They is not the Lebanese people. It's not.
If I may finish.
Yes?
Israel's objective, fourth objective in this war, is to make sure that the inhabitants of the northern part of Israel can return safely to their homes. And that is not possible as long as Hezbollah continues to shoot directly and destroy those homes. And so we will not cease until that goal has been reached. We have no business in conquering Lebanon or doing anything beside to make sure to take away that threat. And if you ask about the Lebanese government, I would ask you where there has been Canada or the Lebanese government or the United Nations for 20-something years about implementing Security Council Resolution 1701 and 1559, which call for the retreat of all these militias, Hezbollah, and the disarming of this whole perimeter or this whole strip of land to the northern part of the border for 10 kilometers. Where were the calls for ceasefire when Hezbollah killed 12 children? Where were the calls for ceasefire when Hezbollah on October the 8th voluntarily decided to attack Israel? Out of their own will. There was no provocation. There was nothing there. We have actually retreated into the international borderline many years ago, as acknowledged by the United Nations, but there is no mention of that. So only when there is some kind of this double standard, Israel is all of a sudden asked to cease fire. So if we stop fire, it will only mean that Hezbollah can rearm themselves and continue to shoot into Israel. It would make no sense. Hezbollah is not a member of the United Nations. Hezbollah will not go to court. There is no policeman that come to Hezbollah and tell them, listen, there is an agreement, stop firing. They don't care about agreements. So when we are under attack, why should we cease fire? What sense would it make if somebody attacks you and he'll tell you, let's have a ceasefire? Would you agree?
This is a terrible situation. It's a terrible situation and it's a complicated situation. But if the question is, what, if anything, is Israel doing to help or allow Canadians in Lebanon exit amid this terrible situation, I think the answer is nothing is being done.
What would you expect me to tell you? The airport is open. Mm-hmm. There is nothing that Israel does at the moment to inhibit anybody from leaving the country.
Foreign interference has been a huge issue in Canada this past year, and on almost a daily basis, when I report about anti-Semitism, I face an allegation, well, obviously you work for Israel. Obviously you're a conspirator, a collaborator with the Israeli state. I'm accused of being some sort of a secret agent, and it's also evokes an anti-Semitic trope that Jews control the media and conspire with each other. When your office reached out, I was told that you would welcome a chance to meet with me to discuss collaboration. Mm-hmm. Mr. Ambassador, I'm accused of being an Israeli collaborator every day. I responded instead, I said, let's have an interview. If I had responded, I would love to collaborate with Israel, what would have happened next?
The collaboration is regarding having an opportunity to talk with us and to hear our opinion. That's kind of collaboration. If that's collaboration, then you're guilty. But that's where it ends. There is nothing else behind that. And the idea is.
Please be careful. I don't think you understand.
No.
If it was true that I agreed to collaborate with Israel, that's it.
We never met before, and there is nothing behind it. The whole point is really that we want to bring our points across. We want people to listen, to ask us tough questions. Sometimes questions that are borderline fair or not, but that's the way it is. It's up to you. That's the whole point. Nothing beyond that.
Okay. Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much.
Thank you.